All living beings are capable of emitting energy in one direction, and sooner or later, they create energetic pendulums. Here are some examples of pendulums in the living world: colonies of bacteria, populations of organisms, schools of fish, herds of animals, forests, or anthills. Any more or less orderly and homogeneous structures of living organisms. Every individual living being is itself an elementary pendulum, since it represents an energetic unit. When a group of such individual pendulums begins to oscillate in unison, a group pendulum is created. It stands above its adherents like a tuning system, existing as a separate, independent structure, and it establishes rules for its followers in order to hold them together and attract new ones. Such a structure is independent in the sense that it develops on its own, according to its own laws. Followers don't realize that they are acting by the laws of the pendulum and not of their own free will. For example, a bureaucratic system develops as an independent structure, regardless of the will of individual officials. Of course, an influential bureaucrat can make independent decisions, but these decisions cannot go against the laws of the system, otherwise that adherent will be rejected. Even a single person who by themselves represents a pendulum does not always understand their own motivations. For example, an energy vampire. Any pendulum, by its very nature, is destructive because it takes energy from its adherents and establishes power over them. The destructiveness of a pendulum lies in the fact that it doesn't care about the fate of any individual follower. A pendulum has only one goal: to receive energy from its adherents. Whether this benefits the adherent or not is irrelevant. A person caught under the influence of a system is forced to build their life according to its laws, otherwise it will chew them up and spit them out. Under the influence of a destructive pendulum, one can easily ruin their life. Escaping without losses is usually difficult. If a person is lucky, they find their place in the system and feel comfortable there. Being a follower, they give energy to the pendulum, and in return it provides them an environment in which to exist. But once a follower starts to break the rules of the structure, their frequency no longer matches the resonant frequency of the pendulum's oscillation. Not receiving energy, the pendulum will reject or destroy the rebellious follower. If a person has strayed far from the lifelines favorable to them, then life inside an alien pendulum structure becomes hard labor or simply dull existence. Such a pendulum becomes purely destructive for its follower. A person under its influence loses freedom. They are forced to live by imposed rules and become just a cog in a big mechanism, whether they like it or not. A person may come under the protection of a pendulum and achieve outstanding results. Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, and others like them were all favorites of destructive pendulums. But in any case, the pendulum never cared about the well-being of its followers. It only used them for its own purposes. When Napoleon was once asked if he had ever truly been happy, he counted only a few days in his entire life. One could argue that there are charitable organizations, societies for the protection of nature and animals, and so on. What could be destructive about them? For you personally, it's the fact that one way or another they feed on your energy and care nothing for someone else's happiness or well-being. They call on you to be compassionate toward others while remaining indifferent to you. If that suits you, and you truly feel happy doing such work, then you can consider it a calling. You found your pendulum. But here you must be honest with yourself. Are you really sincere in giving your energy and money for the benefit of others? Or are you playing at charity just to appear better? Destructive pendulums have trained people out of choosing their own destiny. After all, if a person were truly free to choose, they would gain independence, and then no pendulum could draw them into its ranks. Our consciousness has become so accustomed to the idea that destiny is something predetermined that it's genuinely hard for us to believe in the possibility of simply choosing the life path we prefer. It is in the pendulum's interest to keep their followers under control. That's why they invent all kinds of ways to manipulate their servants. As you'll see further, how exactly they do this will become clear. Even transurfing itself can become a pendulum if it is turned into a cult, a movement, or a school. Different pendulums, of course, are destructive to varying degrees. Transurfing, even in the worst case, would be the least destructive, since it serves not some external collective goal, but exclusively the well-being of each individual. Such a pendulum would be quite unusual, a community of individualists concerned only with their own destiny. By the way, here's your homework. Which pendulums could be called constructive? And why am I telling you all this? To explain what it really means to choose your destiny and how to do it. Be patient, dear reader. It's not all that simple, but gradually the picture will become clearer. At the material level, we observe such interactions in the form of familiar patterns. For example, the pendulum of a political party conducts propaganda, hooks a follower, and gives them a certain energetic boost in the form of a sense of righteousness, satisfaction, dignity, and significance. The follower feels as if they have control over the situation, that they are making choices. In reality, it is they who have been chosen, and control has been established over them. Outwardly, this looks like the follower is convinced they are exercising their own will. But in truth, that will has been subtly and imperceptibly imposed by the pendulum. The follower enters its informational field, communicates with like-minded people on heated topics, forms energetic connections, and thereby locks into its frequency. Later, in disillusionment, the follower may turn against their former idol, and their frequency drops out of the pendulum's resonance loop. The strength of the capture varies depending on the power of the pendulum. In some cases, the follower is simply allowed to leave. In others, such a heretic may be deprived of freedom or even life. The capture of frequency can be illustrated with a simple example. You're humming a tune to yourself, but suddenly you hear loud music playing nearby. At that point, it becomes very difficult to continue humming your old tune. For the purposes of transurfing, it doesn't matter exactly how the interaction between pendulum and follower happens on the energetic level. We will study it using a simplified model. For everyday understanding, this is more than enough. No one can precisely and definitively explain what really happens, because then we would have to ask, what do we even mean by really? And so on, into infinity. Since the process of knowing is endless, it's a thankless task, so we'll have to settle for less and be glad we can at least grasp something. Let's take a closer look at how pendulums manipulate their followers.